Shirley here with Sirius Telus Moon, and this is Jupiter hour, Saturn day. The moon is conjoining Fomalhaut, and Jupiter is 22nd degree descendant on Procyon, and the ascendant is 25 degrees Capricorn, with Saturn 27 degrees Pisces. Well, midheaven ruled by Mars in Scorpio. This energy reading is going to be a little bit of, at least beginning on, a little heavy undertone. And it assigns to the Neptune-related traumas and significations. While Neptune can be complete dissociation, the question of whether something is real or what is, you think about something that is happening that is so terrible that somebody wonders if that's real, and that wondering that if that's real is actually the evidence that something happened. Neptune has to do with sacrifice, secret societies, mafia, drugs, psychiatry. Now, I'm going to open with a certain story, and I told that several times, which was a late event. Um, and basically, that story goes about, and the way that I hear that story is basically from a friend of mine, and I see an emotional Facebook post that says, and all the triggers apply here, he buried her twice. And I asked her what happened, because I didn't understand whether the news or something. And now it's kind of like he's giving a little bit the true Brussels and something. Now, that topic of the buried alive concept, they were doing also. First of all, there was some that magic done on me around that. I know that the people that have been around real estate, that's a theme. So, and they had to sometimes do that to others as well. Um, yeah, and that ritual has to now think about somebody's fourth house is both the grave and the housing and the motherland, and those rituals are basically harming on both, on all of the significations, also lineage and ancestry. Now, the story was, it's not a story, it's actually a news that actually happened, and that a psychiatric male nurse kidnapped a patient, raped them in the hospital, then kidnapped them and took them out to construction site and buried them alive. And of course they had to struggle with that. Now, knowing a little bit about ritual satanic abuse, very likely that psychiatric nurse was perpetuating something that they had survived or had to watch being done to their loved ones, or had to do that to their loved ones. And this takes me back immediately to the place where my cat was resting next to me, and there was an energy next to me that saw the cat as dead and feared. They constantly saw people alive as dead. I remember that when I was in university, and there was basically an attempt to traffic me to an Epstein ring, okay? And I call it Epstein ring because it's the same principle. Um, and the person that did that also did something to do with trying to convince or trying to go into the astral. And I did not know that it was them, and it can be some sort of, because it's a personality code. But the thing is that they were trying to go along, trying to go along the transmutation of like to agree to die. And of course, this is an analogy of transmutation, but they were genuinely having visuals of somebody being buried alive. And I felt myself in that place, and then I left being a TA there. They would later, around COVID, I think, try to do such sort of death magic. And when a person is being put through perpetual trauma, they actually see that. And so I saw that. Now, I remember about that person that there was a moment where I was looking at them, they were standing in front of me, and suddenly there was like an overlay of timeline that it looked like an old man, way older than they were, and they were dying of something to do with cancer, particularly around the area of the brain. Now, I don't know where did that visual come from, and it was so much so that I tried to connect the things. Now, I was doing an academic research about the body-mind question in the medicines, looking into the politics of the senses and the fact that people that undergone perpetual trauma have less somatic experience and more psychic experiences. And then, of course, I was also listening to people like Teal Swan, Gigi Young, and so on. And I noticed that the times where that person was suddenly doing like treason, or suddenly doing mockery, or suddenly doing, those type of things, that was like a trauma response of some sort of programming, was the best word I could put to that. I knew nothing about, I didn't know to verbalize the word satanic ritual abuse, programming, trafficking rings, personality codes. So, the thing about the Neptune, first of all, there can be two topics. One is survival guilt, and it can be unconscious. Now, because those people are doing rituals to try to project their psyche onto another, even a baby or an infant, a lot of children could be born with things and emotions that they don't even know where they got. Now, Neptune also rules sacrifice. And this is where, up along the journey of recovery, the people that are in those death cults, they are meant to do basically sacrifice of everything around them, including them. And as people recover from that, it's both is facing them to places that they were sacrificed, and bringing trauma to the person that did that sacrifice, that perpetuates the trauma of being sacrificed, the trauma around sacrifice, witnessing sacrifice. And this is because this is the nature of the rituals. They're basically ritual sacrifice, supposedly to have real estate or resources or power or even psychic power. Now, all of these things are actually way better achieved through embodiment, well nourishment, and so on and so forth. And everything is completely antithetical to ritual sacrifice, whether in the name of Christ or Antichrist. And I actually watched Mark Boyersky, and I really liked how he has grown, talking about the fact that a lot of people share tidbits of the Matrix and then tell people to connect with God, bringing them back to the Matrix. Because the God that they tell them to connect, even Jesus that they tell to connect, is the back in the matrix God that was created by actually people to perpetuate evil. And that was really resonating with my own gnosis of what people call spiritual warfare as a person that absolutely liked Jesus. And I was like, wait a second, there's just something here. That's beyond the gods or the monotheistic gods that we were taught, that were inspired by indigenous gods. So it's because some people idealize the indigenous gods, and like Eshu can be the mercurial quality of transmutation and adaptability, and Eshu can also be Baphomet, plainly so. Okay, but white people were enslaved by black people as well, and so going back to this timeline of sacrifice is that there was a desire to have less sacrifice and more intimacy. But that had to be real and authentic. And then there was this Neptunian timelines that expose certain illusions, particularly when it's something about what is the nature of certain connection or certain juxtaposition or even when healing itself, Neptune, is being used as extortion means. Now, every timeline of healing from those trajectories bring up those topics. And this is how, for example, people beginning to recover from ritual abuse may cause people that are in those timelines of perpetuating ritual abuse feeling like now they're being sacrificed. This is a part of what happened in the Me Too, because basically the people that were usually sacrificed, that were considered the losers, and there was a lot of control around the blood type, the bloodline, the profiling of who is to be sacrificed, who is to be expandable child, and so on and so forth, and who is to, diagnose what a person likes and what this and what that. But again, leaning on testimonies of people, whether it's Annika Lucas herself or people that testified, that basically share their story and testimony as ritual abuse survivors. And how should I say that? And then there was a sacrifice of, let's say, the women, just as there was. Now, if a woman would complain, let's say, of being sexually harassed in academia, they would literally, willingly or not, try to bring that person to psychiatric diagnosis or whatnot. Now, my journey was very particular because I did not come with those fears from the psychiatric world, because for me it was like, for some people to say, well, I have a headache, was like, I have a mental something. And only through that journey of looking into those things, I was like, wait a second. There is, underneath that physical symptom and that mental symptom, there is something bigger. And this is where I like the other Mark Boyarsky, mentioning that when you heal a person, is basically them healing themselves, of course, but it's basically helping them to cope with and to change and to heal themselves from the matrix, basically. Now, when it came to the timeline of the Me Too, that was a significant timeline where up until then, the women were simply sacrificed. Their joy of living, their orgasm, their mental and physical health. Womb hysteria, hysterium. that was completely sacrificed. And not only that, the only way they would even steal from the womb to have cloned babies in very horrific ways. And then came the Me Too, and the tables flipped, and now the people began to feel like they are being sacrificed in that shift and change that they had 12 millennia to prepare for. But they kept being smug about not having to prepare for. Now, there was a lot of ritual torture surrounding that, but it was becoming more and more obvious that people refused to cooperate with ritual sacrifice. And even amongst my colleagues, there were some people coming from maybe secret societies of other regions where that notion that certain people won't cooperate with ritual sacrifice, to put it plainly, was not accepted. And they tried to torture the people who wouldn't sacrifice within the community for real estate. Now, here's the thing, when we talk about even marital relations, so going outside of the immediate circles of like real estate and so on, every couple usually marries and have like an apartment and then think about having a family and so on. Then it was expected from a woman to sacrifice so that the man will be sexually satisfied, which means that he will never be satisfied. Okay, the actual satisfaction, whatever the kink is, what the actual satisfaction is a mutual sexually sovereign union of two. They can play with power shifting, they can play with surrendering into one another, they can like, but the essence of orgasmic healthy kundalini rise. And I'm not talking about there are a lot of people, there are a lot of techniques that are done to bring the kundalini rise that are actually mockery rituals, and I addressed that in the previous video that I'm now uploading. But the thing is that, and I really like when Mark Bayersky talked about, and I know exactly what man he's talking about, that the people that wear crystals and white robes and have sex with everyone and called it tantric whatever. And I'm like, this is so true. We actually had a man who raped, I think, 100 women, and he was trying to do this 72 faces of God or something like that, and together with actually Vedic something, and basically he was trying to see himself in each and every personality, and he was also raping hundreds of women, had a weird cult of women. In fact, one of the women that I severed ties with, she was a relationship coach, and she was really optimistic about men. That guy went under both our radar, except that for me, I was like, well, I'm not going to meet with that person. Something's not something for me. But I never thought like that he's a rapist or anything like that. That lady kept talking to me about the intuition, that she has an intuition. Now, for me, it was after I escaped for my life from a psychologist. I had an astral encounter that began as something that was not something I would consider rapey, but didn't end that way, particularly when I wanted to explore my non-sexual self. And so I just felt that intuition was somewhere, like, where was like, and that lady was like, there is intuition, there is that. And after that, the person that was her therapist, and I hope she wasn't hurt, was discovered as a man who raped hundreds of women, going through healing them sexually and being with them as they heal from sexual trauma. Now, this is because of those mafiosi treason cults. And this is exactly what Mark Piersky is talking about. He can't say it. But we all, and this is why people have so deterred from even trying to be sexual or because everything that is tantrically embodiment was being offered by a treason cult as another way to get people back to the timelines of trafficking people and harvesting on their energy. And so for a lot of people, particularly, I totally get the okay boomers that they have those filters where they literally ran into nothing real, and so everything looks like a hoax for them. And then there are the people who are understanding, coming out of that hoax matrix, and sometimes they're going through certain routes or certain places, or like when I was in therapy and I had a good friend who's saying something is off with that psychologist. They're trying to play on your trying to trigger erotic things to their own. I don't remember how they say that. And I was very naively trusting my psychologist, and I was like, hey, that thing is happening, while being, saying, okay, I'm not dating people, and I did come to treat like sexual boundary violation, and I did come to change the patient practitioner relation to sovereign relation, to have patient sovereignty. But that person was going full blown MK Ultra. And so is the problem the person that there was like an astral encounter? No, the problem was even deeper, that they were having a treat. Let's say I would be dating that person, that would mean that I would still get hurt, not because they're a psychologist, but actually because they were groomed to be an Epstein, and that would entail me dating an Epstein. It's a treason cult. And yet, to recover from those things entails like we have to live somewhere, we have to have income that is honoring of our sexual sovereignty, we have to reconnect with our own passion, and that entails the sexual energy. And so trying to enslave people to a matrix where they can't even have that embodied heart connection that is also sensual only brings back the feeling of people that they have been sacrificed, where they're trying to perpetuate ritual satanic abuse. Now, for some people, they're actually in a situation where they fear they might be literally sacrificed if they don't get to sacrifice that other person that is healing from ritual abuse. I said that it's going to have heavy undertones. And here is the thing, the people that got out of those societies did that by pointing their boundary setting and aggression to the perpetrators, not as vengeance, as setting a boundary. And that boundary had to be fierce, because otherwise they would be sacrificed by their loved one. And this is how you would get people that see anything living and already see it as dead. Now remember the story I opened up with? It's something that happened in a psychiatric ward. And the person was taken to a construction site. Now, what building is built there? Are they going to be just people living there? How does that affect the energy of the place? And what happened when that's done with connection to the motherland, burial processes, and harming of the conception, fertility, pregnancy, and labor process. And it's not for nothing that the Epstein ring is associated with a cloning farm of human babies. In Netherlands, there was a scandal of babies that were born. There were many scandals for children. But this time, babies that were born in a hospital. There were a lot. Uranus is in the 12th house for Netherlands. So a lot of hospital scandals. Something with the elderly people as well. I'm not up to speed with all the scandals. Like how are you reconnecting with your fatherland? I'm learning Dutch. What are you watching? Peggy Van Roy. A podcast about ritual satanic abuse in Dutch. That's considering speaking, learning the language. um, so the thing is that masses of people need to set the boundaries to those that come to perpetuate ritual abuse, and that all the things that were gaslighting, blame shifting, the swiping under the rug, the missing documents, and not going to. And this is a very approaching timeline, because those things begin to affect. Think about how it looks like when the Gen Z revolution is considered. Gen Zs are infected with the viral revolution. Let's talk again about those psychiatric nurses that are raping patients and sacrificing them in construction sites. That's a disease. Okay. Now, I can't really say seek help, go to therapy, see a psychiatrist. That happened in Israel. Okay, just like that's one scandal that didn't happen in Netherlands. What's the House of Orange connection? I don't know. Because when it happened in the Netherlands, they're working for the Mossad. This is what they're working for Israel. They're doing this for Israel. When it happened in Israel, why is everything MK Ultra? US, 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 US. We're living in a US military basement in the Middle East. Why is everybody an informant in the United States? Are the informant of the CIA or the... Now, let's all wait for the kidnapped people to return before we talk about Trumpstein. I'm a small channel, I can do that. Nobody watches. Um, oh my god. This is so... Okay, this is so... I have to translate. I don't think I can translate that. The Israeli says we are not in a ceasefire, we are in a diminishing of fire. Um, this is exactly how the idea of it. There was an Israeli comedian, and he talked about he was making a skit, and in that skit he said he was coming back from from the army, and he left 1 hour early, and it was caught on camera. Later, his commander talks to him, and she says, "Why did you leave 1 hour earlier? We said that you can't leave 1 hour earlier." He said, "I left at 5." He said, "But it's written at 4." He says, "I don't know what's written. I left at 5." Shows them a footage of a camera. The camera shows you camera that shows the clock. I don't know what the camera shows, what the camera doesn't show, and I left at 5. And it's just gaslightus maximus. And this is just an IDF soldier trying to survive. The IDF. Now, now they are diminishing fire, not ceasing fire. They are only besieging Gaza when the kidnapped are released. Nobody is withdrawn. They are diminishing fire, not ceasing fire. First, they release all the kidnapped and then continue the negotiations. Okay, now it's not like Hamas is any more reliable. And mind you, those are treason cults. Those are treason cults. If they identify threats, they are allowed to open fire in Gaza. So we are still waiting for the kidnapped people.